Hi, everyone. So my name is Khadijah, and I work with Paystack Payments Limited, essentially leading the products and partnerships team. It's my first time in Lisbon, so super excited to be here. Yay! All right, so Paystack is a payments gateway that essentially helps businesses across Africa accept payments. We started out in late 2015 with a private beta, and then we got into YC as an accelerator. We're the first company out of Nigeria to get into YC, fun fact. Went ahead to launch in early 2016 with a little under 100 merchants. And just over the next 3 years, we went on to grow 10x year on year, up to the point where, as at last month, we had processed over 10 billion naira in transaction value and supporting businesses that amount to over 23,000. So for context, the year before that, we had done the equivalent of 1 billion and had just like under 4,000 merchants. So the growth rate has been super, super exponential. And right now, we support some of the biggest businesses across the world, both businesses targeting consumers in Africa and then companies out of Africa also targeting global audiences. A few of these businesses are listed here. You saw Luno on stage earlier. Also power companies like Taxify, Betway, Domino's, and then tons and tons of smaller businesses operating out of Nigeria. The last few months have been really, really exponential in terms of growth for fintech companies across Africa. If you've been following the news very closely, you've seen that there's been a landmark investment of over $250 million into fintech companies in Africa. Now, companies like Branch and Tala providing lending services to consumers and smaller businesses account for over 50% of that number. And then there are tons of others there as well. Paystack completed her Series A also earlier this year, led by Stripe, Visa, and Tencent. Now, the way that we empower businesses is in 3 ways. The first of which is essentially helping businesses get started. So looking back at how payments were being utilized in the space prior to Paystack, the barrier to entry was really, really high. So you had to pay the equivalent of about $1,000 to get started. The implementation process could take months for you to complete. And then there was a technology barrier where people that were not really savvy couldn't really access the service. So for Paystack, what we did was to review the entire setup process to say, how can we ensure that people like Khadijah can just literally desire this service and access it in real time? So we went on to automate a number of services, including KYC. How do we vet businesses, ensure that there are no persons that we shouldn't be working with getting into the system? The developer documentation as well, making sure that it was as simplified as possible. We also have something we call payment pages, where you can essentially generate a link that will help you start accepting payments, so that even though you don't have a website or you don't have the capacity to carry out an integration, you'll be able to, essentially start using the service as well. That's one. The second way we do this is helping businesses get paid. So we usually say that building a business is hard enough. If you've done the hard work of convincing a consumer to pay you for any service, then the least we can do is make sure that that payment goes through. So on the screen, you can see a plethora of payment channels through which people can accept payments on Paystack. So where before you would have had to integrate separately to individual card schemes or individual banks, with Paystack and just one implementation, you can essentially access payments from your consumers however they choose to pay you. So if I want to pay you from my mobile app, you can do that. If I want to pay you via a USSD string, you can do that as well. And just a number of other services are being supported by the platform. And then the third way in which we do this is helping businesses grow. So we see what we do beyond just accepting payments to also drive growth for our businesses. So looking at us as some sort of growth engine as well, we carry out a lot of capacity building for our merchants. There are tons of communities that we've built to experiment with social commerce, provide support services to our merchants, just building an ecosystem to say, if we have businesses using Paystack that can provide advisory services, and then we have merchants that also use Paystack that are desirous of those services, then the least we can do is connect them and then build that community and ecosystem for them to support each other. So those 3 ways are the various avenues through which we've been able to experience exponential growth over the past 3 years. Now, this has led to a number of interesting things that we've observed in the space. A number of the businesses that use Paystack didn't exist 2-3 years ago. So essentially, Paystack is being touted as, like the startup that helps startups grow. And there are some interesting trends we've seen. So there's a lot of innovation around savings. Traditionally, people need to understand how stocks work or how to buy shares or invest in mutual funds and things like that. But now there's a lot of innovation around that space where you can essentially download a mobile application and then they take care of all your investment needs, guarantee your interest at the end of the day, and then leverage on Paystack to facilitate payments. We have some interesting businesses experimenting in that space. Piggybank and Cowrywise are 2 of them. Also, in the lending space, there's a lot of innovation there as well, where people would typically defer to banks to provide financing for their businesses and ideas. Now we have companies like Branch and Pay Later, Isla Credit as well, just essentially removing that barrier and saying that an individual can essentially access a microloan in minutes. The third space in which we've also seen things evolve is agri-tech. So you have companies that are experimenting with crowdsourcing funds to support the business of agriculture, specifically out of Nigeria. What we've seen is majority of the middle class that are interested in farming, for example, but don't have the bandwidth to go to a rural area and buy a plot of land and start growing crops, can just essentially connect with farmers that are doing this sort of thing via platforms like FarmCrowdy and Thrive Agric. So these are just 3 exciting trends that are coming out of Africa at the moment. And then, at large, I think that the interesting thing as well that we've seen is beyond businesses outside of Nigeria or Africa at large, targeting the Nigerian market. I mean, 190 million people is very attractive. So how do you, as a global entity, scale in such a way that you can facilitate seamless payments and then get your money back out of your primary country of operation? That's kind of like where Paystack comes in. So we help businesses that operate across the globe target the Nigerian or African consumer markets, as well as encourage businesses operating out of Africa to target an even wider audience as well. We started a beta program in Ghana late last year, earlier this year, 2018, and looking to launch that formally in Q1 of 2019, hopefully to grow into 5 more African countries within the next 18 months. So I think the biggest lessons for us are around how we've been able to do this. It's just like focus. I love the quote by Steve Jobs that says that focus is not just saying yes to one thing. It's essentially saying no to like a gazillion other things. So in a developing economy, there are tons of ways you can facilitate payments, but staying true to the course and focusing on going in deep versus wide is pretty much how we've been able to scale that quickly. The other thing is building the right team. We're very fortunate at Paystack to work with people who not only excel at what they do, but are also subject matter experts in their own field. These are community leaders. These are people that, give back to people that are learning in various skills in their areas of expertise as well. The third thing I would say is nothing beats hard work. So it's easy to glamorize the outcome. I mean, we're all seated here today looking at the seeming success story, but there are sleepless nights and there's tons of work that goes into building the right product and supporting it the way that it should operate. That's one other key lesson. And then the last one that I would say is transparency, which also happens to be one of our core values. I always say that storytelling is important. We've learned to take people along on our journey, so that you can listen and encounter what we're encountering. The intention is that by looking at the mistakes that we make or the things that we seem to have gotten right, you can also empower yourself and your business to do the same. And then finally, I think just 2 areas that we are still finding very challenging, which shouldn't be new to anybody here that works or leads a startup. The first one is essentially scaling our infrastructure to support the exponential growth that we're experiencing. And then the second one is just finding the right people. Finding talent is a full-time job as it is. Always on the lookout. Feel free to holler at me if you're interested in helping us achieve this business. Thank you very much.